The electric bill landed on my kitchen counter, shocking me deeply. $347 for a single month. I stared at the numbers, convinced there had to be some mistake. My little ranch house had never cost more than $120 to power, even during the hottest summer months when the AC ran constantly.
I'm Dave Mitchell, and I've been living in Sunset Ridge HOA for exactly 6 months. I thought the worst part about HOA life would be the endless emails about trash can colors and lawn height regulations. I was wrong. The worst part was Karen Hoffman. Karen was the self-appointed neighborhood watchdog, the kind of person who measured your grass with a ruler and filed complaints if your mailbox was 2 inches off center. But what made her truly unbearable was her smugness, especially after she bought that brand new Tesla Model S that she parked strategically in her driveway like a trophy. "It's the future, Dave," she'd announced to anyone within earshot during the last HOA meeting. "Clean energy, zero emissions. Some of us care about the environment." The way she said "some of us" while looking directly at my 2015 Ford truck made her meaning crystal clear. But as I held that outrageous electric bill in my hands, something wasn't adding up. My workshop tools were efficient lead-powered equipment. My house was small and well insulated. There was no way my energy consumption had tripled overnight. That night, I grabbed the flashlight and decided to investigate. What I discovered changed everything. Before we dive deeper into this story, drop a comment with your location and what time you're watching. I love seeing where my viewers are from around the world. Following my outdoor electrical lines with the flashlight, I traced every outlet, every connection, and every wire running around my property. Everything looked normal until I reached the outlet on the back corner of my house, the one I rarely used, tucked behind some shrubs where it wasn't visible from the street. There, coiled in the darkness, was a heavy-duty extension cord, not mine. I followed that cord across my backyard, through a gap in the fence, straight into Karen's garage. It was plugged directly into her Tesla charging station. My jaw clenched as the pieces fell into place. Karen Hoffman, the environmental crusader who lectured everyone about clean energy and responsibility, had been stealing my electricity to charge her $80,000 electric car. The next morning, I marched straight to her front door, electric bill in hand. Karen answered wearing her usual condescending smile, already dressed in her power suit despite it being barely 7 a.m. "Karen, we need to talk. You're stealing my power." She didn't even blink. "Stealing is such an ugly word, Dave. It's just a little electricity. You can afford it. Besides, the HOA bylaws clearly state that neighbors should share resources when possible." I felt my blood pressure rising. "Not like this. That's theft. Unplug it, now." Her smile turned into a smirk. "Or what? You'll file a complaint? Good luck with that. I am the HOA Compliance Committee. I write the violations, not receive them." Then she shut the door in my face. Standing on her porch, I realized I was dealing with someone who believed she was above the rules she enforced on everyone else. Karen had spent months making my neighbors' lives miserable with petty violations and frivolous fines, and now she was literally stealing from me while hiding behind her HOA authority. But Karen had made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was just another pushover neighbor who would quietly accept her abuse. She had no idea that my hobby workshop wasn't just for weekend projects. I was a licensed electrical contractor who'd spent 15 years wiring commercial buildings before retiring early. I understood electrical systems, power consumption, and most importantly, I understood documentation. That evening, I began what would become the most thorough electrical investigation Karen Hoffman had ever faced. First, I installed a digital power meter on the outlet Karen had been using. This device would record exact usage times and power consumption rates and create a detailed log of when electricity was being drawn from my system. The results were staggering. Every night between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., my meter showed massive power draws exactly when Tesla vehicles typically charge during off-peak hours. Karen wasn't just stealing electricity. She was stealing it strategically to minimize her own costs while maximizing mine. Over the next week, I documented everything. Photos of the extension cord. Video footage of Karen plugging and unplugging her charging system. Screenshots of my smart meter showing power spikes that coincided perfectly with her charging schedule. But the most damaging evidence came from studying my electric bills over the past 6 months. The power theft hadn't started recently. It had been going on since the week after Karen bought her Tesla. She'd been systematically stealing from me for months, timing it perfectly with my billing cycles to avoid detection. I calculated the total theft. Over $900 in stolen electricity. Karen had essentially gotten free fuel for her Tesla for half a year while I paid the bill. The psychological impact was almost worse than the financial cost. Karen would wave at me from her driveway while washing her Tesla, knowing she was stealing from me, knowing I knew, and knowing she thought there was nothing I could do about it. During the next HOA meeting, I watched Karen lecture other neighbors about their excessive energy consumption and the need for environmental responsibility. The hypocrisy was nauseating. She was stealing electricity while preaching conservation. "We all need to do our part to reduce our carbon footprint," she announced to the assembled homeowners. "Some residents in this community are using far too much power. We might need to implement usage monitoring to ensure everyone is being responsible." The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. After the meeting, I approached Karen one more time, hoping to resolve this privately before escalating to legal action. "Karen, I have documentation proving you've been stealing my electricity for months. I'm asking you one final time to stop and reimburse me for what you've taken." She actually laughed. "Documentation? Dave, I am the documentation in this neighborhood. I decide what violations exist and who gets punished. Your little complaint file means nothing." That's when she made her biggest mistake. "Besides," she continued, "even if you're right, what are you going to do about it? Call the police? They don't handle HOA disputes. Call a lawyer? That'll cost you more than a few electric bills. Face it, you're stuck with me." Her arrogance was absolute, her confidence unshakable. Karen truly believed she was untouchable. She was about to learn otherwise. The next morning, I made a phone call that would change everything. Not to the police, not to a lawyer, but to someone Karen hadn't considered. The electric company's theft investigation division. "This is Sarah Chan from Metro Electric Security. We take power theft very seriously, Mr. Mitchell. Can you email us your documentation?" Within an hour, I'd sent them everything. Photos, videos, power consumption logs, billing records, and a detailed timeline of the theft. Sarah called me back before lunch. "Mr. Mitchell, this is one of the most well-documented theft cases we've ever received. We'll have investigators at your property tomorrow morning." What Karen didn't know was that electrical theft isn't just a civil matter, it's a criminal offense. Electric companies have dedicated fraud investigation teams with law enforcement authority. They can issue warrants, press charges, and impose penalties that make HOA fines look like pocket change. The investigation team arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. 2 investigators, a forensic electrician, and a police officer. They spent 3 hours documenting everything, testing connections, and measuring power flows. The lead investigator, Detective Rodriguez, was thorough and professional. "Mr. Mitchell, we're seeing clear evidence of unauthorized electrical connection and systematic power theft. The estimated value exceeds felony thresholds." While they worked, I noticed Karen peeking through her curtains, probably wondering why there were official vehicles in my driveway. She had no idea the net was closing around her. The investigators asked if I wanted to confront the suspect directly or if I preferred they handle initial contact. Given Karen's previous responses, I opted for the professional approach.
At exactly 10:30 a.m., Detective Rodriguez and the electric company investigators knocked on Karen's door. I watched from my kitchen window as Karen answered, probably expecting to complain about the disturbance in the neighborhood.
Her confident expression changed to confusion, then concern, then outright panic as the investigators identified themselves and explained why they were there. "Ma'am, we're investigating reports of electrical theft from your neighbor's property. We need to examine your electrical connections and charging equipment." Karen's voice carried across the yard as she tried to maintain her authority. "This is harassment. I'm the HOA compliance officer. You can't just—" "Ma'am," Detective Rodriguez interrupted calmly. "Electrical theft is a criminal matter that supersedes HOA jurisdiction. We have a warrant to inspect the premises." That's when Karen's world began to crumble. The investigators found everything exactly as I documented. The extension cord, the unauthorized connection, and the charging setup had been systematically stealing power for months. But they also found something I hadn't expected: evidence that Karen had done this before. In her garage, they discovered multiple heavy-duty extension cords, electrical adapters, and a notebook where she tracked her alternative charging locations, a list that included 3 other neighbors who'd probably never noticed the small increases in their electric bills. Karen wasn't just a thief. She was a serial thief who turned power theft into a systematic operation. Detective Rodriguez emerged from Karen's garage with a box of evidence and a grim expression. "Mr. Mitchell, this is much bigger than we initially thought. We're looking at organized electrical fraud affecting multiple victims." The legal consequences came swiftly. Electric companies don't mess around with power theft. It costs them millions annually and creates safety hazards that can affect entire grid systems. Karen was charged with grand theft for stealing over $900 in electricity from me alone, criminal fraud for the systematic nature of the theft, multiple counts of electrical code violations that carried hefty fines, endangerment charges for creating unauthorized electrical connections. But the civil penalties were even more devastating. The electric company imposed a $5,000 fraud fine, required installation of a tamper-proof meter system, and placed Karen on the high-risk customer list, which meant higher deposits and closer monitoring. Her insurance company, after learning about the criminal charges, dropped her coverage for fraudulent behavior. This month she was personally liable for any damages or safety issues related to her electrical work. The HOA's legal counsel, when they learned that their compliance officer was facing criminal charges for theft, immediately suspended Karen from all positions and launched their own investigation into her conduct. But the most satisfying consequence was watching Karen's environmental superiority complex evaporate. The woman who'd lectured everyone about responsible energy use was exposed as a criminal who'd been stealing electricity for months. The local newspaper, always hungry for community interest stories, picked up the case. HOA officer charged with systematic power theft made the front page of the community section, complete with photos of Karen's Tesla and quotes from the electric company about the seriousness of electrical fraud. 3 months later, I sat in the courthouse watching Karen face Judge Martinez for sentencing. The woman who'd once strutted through HOA meetings like a queen now stood before a real authority figure, one whose decision she couldn't ignore or override. "Ms. Hoffman," Judge Martinez said, reviewing the case file, "you held a position of trust in your community while systematically committing crimes against your neighbors. This represents a particularly egregious breach of community standards." Karen received 6 months supervised probation, $2,400 in restitution to me and the other affected neighbors, 200 hours of community service specifically with low-income energy assistance programs, permanent ban from holding any HOA leadership positions. A criminal record that would follow her forever. But the real justice wasn't the legal penalties, it was watching the community's response. Word spread quickly through Sunset Ridge about Karen's crimes. The woman who'd terrorized neighbors with petty violations and environmental lectures was exposed as a hypocrite and a thief. Her moral authority evaporated overnight. The HOA board, embarrassed by the scandal, implemented new oversight procedures and elected a completely new leadership team. They also passed rules requiring background checks for all board positions, rules that would have prevented Karen's abuse of power. My electric bills returned to normal actually. They went even lower after I installed the energy monitoring system I'd used to catch Karen. The irony wasn't lost on me that her theft had motivated me to become more energy efficient than she'd ever been. Karen's Tesla, once her pride and symbol of environmental superiority, became a neighborhood joke. Everyone knew it had been charged with stolen electricity for months. The clean energy vehicle had been powered by criminal activity. 6 months after her conviction, Karen put her house up for sale. She couldn't handle living in a community where everyone knew she was a convicted thief. The for sale sign went up the same week she finished her community service hours. The new owners were a young couple with a hybrid car and solar panels, actually environmentally responsible, unlike their predecessor. Karen Hoffman thought she'd found the perfect crime. She believed her HOA position made her untouchable, that neighbors would be too intimidated to challenge her authority, and that small amounts of theft would go unnoticed. She was wrong on every count. The moral of this story isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. When someone abuses their position of authority to commit crimes, documenting everything and involving the proper authorities is the most effective response. Karen spent months terrorizing neighbors with petty power trips while literally stealing power for her own benefit. But real authority law enforcement, the courts, the electric company, doesn't care about HOA politics or neighborhood hierarchies. Today, I still live in Sunset Ridge, but it's a different community now. Without Karen's toxic influence, neighbors actually talk to each other, help each other, and work together to maintain our community standards. My workshop is busier than ever. Several neighbors have asked me to help them install energy monitoring systems after learning about Karen's theft methods. We've turned her criminal behavior into a community education opportunity. Sometimes the best way to deal with a neighborhood tyrant isn't confrontation or escalation. It's professional, documentation, and letting the appropriate authorities handle justice. If someone is stealing from you, document everything. Involve the right professionals, and let the system work. Because people like Karen count on intimidation and assumed authority, but they crumble when faced with real consequences. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, subscribe for more tales where karma doesn't just visit, it brings backup. Because sometimes the most satisfying revenge is just letting criminals face the natural consequences of their actions.